You know one genre of games I kind of love despite how many mediocre titles release every year? Top-down action RPGs. For me, that started way back in the late 90s with the arcade port of Gauntlet Legends, and subsequently Gauntlet Dark Legacy for the PS2 and GameCube, and in more recent years with Diablo 3. The problem with ARPG games is that while there are a few relatively high-profile indie and AA releases each year, with the very occasional AAA release like the Diablo 2 remake, most of them content themselves with being uninspired, half-assed Diablo knockoffs. That said, it's honestly somewhat relieving when a new ARPG releases that doesn't follow that same tired old parade. While Killsquad here, as you might surmise, is likewise an ARPG, it trades away the usual Diablo-esque medieval dark fantasy art style and melee-centric weapon design in favor of a more futuristic sci-fi art style and lots of guns, among other things. In fact, while it might not reinvent the wheel in every regard, I'd probably say Killsquad is one of the most original ARPGs we've seen released here in the West in the last few years. But before you get carried away with any preconceived notions of what that might imply, keep in mind I said most original, not best. While Killsquad is at its core an ARPG, the way it sets itself apart from what otherwise would be its direct competition is by integrating and combining different game mechanics and concepts popularized in other related genres and mixing them together into this bizarre but oddly effective stew. Killsquad is designed from the ground up as a cooperative four-person action game, although it can also be played solo, although the developers have not, as of now, added bots for solo play. So if you're planning on experiencing this game as a solo player, especially if you're significantly under the recommended gear score for that mission, forsake all hope, he who hit play, because that ties into the next big thing worth mentioning. There is a progression system here, or rather a series of technically separate but still somewhat intertwined leveling systems. You have the overall player level, which doesn't mean that much aside from showing how much experience you have with the game. You also have the character level, which goes up depending on how many successful missions you've undergone as that character. Leveling up your character over time will unlock stuff like additional inventory slots for specific items, among other things. And of course you have your faction rank. Players can choose between a small number of different factions, none of which really matter or do anything beyond giving you some small exclusive cosmetic items, like titles that you can show off to other players in multiplayer sessions, similar to how you'd show off your earned title of choice in a MMORPG. But unless you're insanely full of yourself like Gilderoy Lockhart from Harry Potter, which definitely isn't my style, that benefit will probably be meaningless to you. Your chosen faction will also provide you with a small number of passive benefits, but they're nothing extraordinary, so I'm not going to waste my time outlining them all for you. The one form of progression you'll have to keep your eye on the closest, however, is of course the weapon leveling system. The main reason for this is that Killsquad's missions are similar to those in Destiny 2, for example, in that they are designed exclusively for players of a certain minimum gear score. In Killsquad, as with Destiny 2, all weapons and other equipment carried by the player are given individual numbered ranks, one being the lowest and the max cap being somewhere in the high 100s it seems. I'll be honest, I haven't grinded my way to the very highest gear score and thus haven't played through the very final levels of the game, and the reason for that is fairly straightforward. For the game's first 4 or 5 missions, aka the first 2 hours or so, the grind is fairly minimal, bordering on almost non-existent. However, after that point, you find yourself increasingly having to replay the same exact levels again and again and again and again, just to grind higher level weapons and enough currency to buy yet more weapons and other higher level equipment for your other slots. Now I said this before like a week or two ago when I was reviewing Rebel Inc., but I generally enjoy some grind. I don't have a huge problem with grind as a core gameplay mechanic. Replaying the same levels can be fun, especially in a multiplayer setting, but as a game, you have to do 2 things, not just one, but both. First, you have to make it worth my while. The rewards for completing said replay must match or exceed the amount of additional time and effort I'll be putting into said replay. And secondly, you have to do something to vary things up in the level or area itself. These can range from offering the player multiple difficulty levels with matching higher loot rewards for successfully completing a run on said one of those higher difficulties, or maybe offering specific limited time challenges that can refresh in between missions. Both of these would be relatively easy from a developmental perspective to add, especially since this game already has scaling difficulty in place in regards to how gear leveling operates, and likewise time-sensitive unlock systems are already in place in other areas, so it wouldn't be hard to port them over to this proposed system as well. By completing missions, you gain a certain amount of currency which you can spend on buying new weapons, consumables, and other useful equipment. However, weapons especially will cost you quite a bit of money. Given how most of the levels will award you with anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 of said currency, and how the weapons appear to continually rise in price the higher their gear score is. Odds are you should be able to buy a new weapon every 4 or 5 matches, so basically once every hour, given the average playthrough rate. The game also seems to do its best to always ensure at least some of the weapons on sale via the in-game vendor meet or slightly exceed your current gear score, which is definitely appreciated. However, if you don't see anything on display that you like, you can click a button to re-roll the store's randomized inventory in the hopes of getting whatever it is you're after. The first re-roll is free, but you can always pay with in-game money if you want to get additional rolls. Now, if your goal is to simply always have one primary and one secondary weapon each, both being at least relatively equal to the missions you're going into, it's not necessarily hard to consistently keep yourself fairly well equipped. However, if your goal is to always have a full set of similarly leveled weapons with at least one of each weapon type, because this is one of those games where certain weapons will be more or less effective against certain bosses and certain common enemies, you'll need a ridiculous amount of money, which entails an equally ridiculous amount of grind. So if you want to dedicate potentially over 100 hours, if not more, into grinding each level the necessary amount of times in order to constantly have a full set of weapon types of similar levels, with each weapon's attributes upgraded, you absolutely can. The game allows you to do that, but if you don't play like a completionist, you can expect almost all the boss fights you walk into to be painfully long. Luckily, as a support character, I can generally afford to sit out a tedious boss fight in all but the direst of circumstances, but not all classes will be able to say the same. As for the missions themselves, this was definitely the single most notable area where the game was wildly inconsistent. The intent behind the level design is pretty clear: to create arcadey levels that you could speedrun easily, or alternatively take your time making your way through if you want. Regardless of the intent, in reality in most cases they'll all feel like the same exact dungeon setup, with you clearing each room or area before proceeding on to the next room or area in a strictly linear fashion. There is very little opportunity for going off the beaten path. There are certainly a few collectibles here and there, but nothing in the vein of alternate routes and secret challenge rooms. If you're going to set yourself up as an arcadey run-and-gun dungeon crawler, you have to commit to that in more ways than just the top-down perspective and co-op support. One arcadey element I do like, and some might even say that this has a bit of a roguelite feel, is this mid-mission upgrade system where you can purchase certain passive character upgrades that stay with you for the remainder of that mission. These can range from a 50% increase in healing from health kits, which I found really useful as a support class, to a limited supply of armor or shielding. If you've ever played a MOBA game or even some FPS games like Overwatch or Apex Legends, you already know about armor and shields, so I'm not really going to delve into that mechanic in detail here, but just know that here it functions fairly similarly as it does there. You earn currency to spend at this upgrade machine by eliminating enemies, which isn't that hard since that's what you're going to be doing anyway. If you find yourself at one of these machines and lacking the money to purchase upgrades, you should really ask yourself whether you're contributing enough to the team. The combat overall isn't that great. There's not a lot of thought or effort behind getting results. You basically just hold down left mouse and wiggle your mouse around in the general direction of enemies, and the game takes care of everything in between for you. The visual feedback you get isn't too bad, but the actual abilities lack that somewhat indescribable visual flair that would otherwise make them oh so satisfying to use. Also, for an arcadey run-and-gun game with an almost MOBA-esque incorporation of abilities and utility gadgets, it's a bit surprising that there really isn't anything in the vein of ultimate abilities or significant crowd control abilities. The closest thing you would get is the support class's right mouse knockback ability, but even that, while rather effective, doesn't look or feel fantastic to use. The one area where each level stands out is the bosses. At the end of every level you have to go up against this enormous boss. These are easily the centerpieces for each level, the crowning jewel of the game. And even then, they aren't perfect. There are a few bosses that are just mechanically not as fun to play against as some of the others, and sadly, due to the way that the game so strictly enforces its gear rank system, it's practically pointless to go back and replay the earliest missions with a high-level character. Personally, I feel this is another missed opportunity on the developer's part. I would have loved to see a separate Monster Hunter-esque game mode where you can go back and replay boss fights with the bosses scaled up to match your increased gear ranking. Maybe have a special challenge mode where you and a group have to take out all the bosses in a row one by one, like you would with individual fighters in the classic Super Smash Bros. Games. And I think that's my ultimate problem with the game. Functionally, it should be a truly phenomenal game. The quality of the game mechanics themselves are mostly beyond repute. The art direction and animation quality are likewise very, very high for a game of its modest scale. The co-op synergy between the different character classes allow for a ton of really fun combo opportunities. But for everything this game gets right, it feels like there are two other areas where the developers either dropped the ball or never bothered to pick it up in the first place. As for whether I'd recommend it to new players, I think the answer lies mainly in two parts. For solo players, or for those of you that don't feel your friends will consistently play it with you, my advice would be definitely not to buy Killsquad. I don't even really care what sale price Steam's offering it at. It will not be worth the solo struggle and insane levels of grind alone. For those of you lucky enough to have a partial or a full group to always play with, yeah, Killsquad might be a good casual game to jump in and out of for you guys. But again, unless you're really intimately turned on by the excessive grind with a very limited pool of levels to choose from, you might want to go watch some more gameplay before deciding whether or not to follow through on buying it. And before we wrap it up for today, I do want to say for the record, because I've been getting a few angry comments in other review videos about this recently, I want to clarify that these review videos aren't walkthroughs, they're not Wikipedia-length entries on how each feature or mechanic works. I'm just here giving my thoughts on the simple question of whether I feel this game is worth buying, along with some pro and con reasons supporting why I feel that way. If you're upset that I didn't spend 5 minutes explaining the intricate details of a certain weapon or cosmetic, just keep in mind I'm trying not to waste everyone else's time by providing them with unnecessary information. I appreciate your enthusiasm though. I also want to make it clear once again that just because I dumb down a game, I'm not offended if you feel differently, so long as we can remain fairly civil in discussing our differences. I'm always happy to hear your thoughts down below. And on that note, that's where I think I'm going to wrap it up for today. As ever, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to click the like button and comment below what you think of the game. Even if you just want to drop a comment saying hi or to get my opinion on something, even if it's unrelated, I'll be more than happy to chat with you down below. Likewise, subscribing and clicking the bell really helps. This is Warrior Dan signing out. Stay awesome everybody, stay safe, and peace out.